Hello, everyone, and welcome to Musing, music for the adventurous listener here on CJSW 90.9 FM in Calgary. I'm your host, Janna Sailor. On today's episode, we have two intrepid guests from the groundbreaking all-female jazz fusion ensemble, the Ostara Project. We'll talk about all things Ostara in just a moment, but first, let's take a listen to an excerpt from their extraordinary new album entitled Roots. The Ostara Project, named for the Germanic goddess of the spring equinox, embodies hope and growth by showcasing the strength and creativity of Canadian women in jazz. Ostara artists are all acclaimed musicians, composers, and band leaders who truly reflect the cultural and creative diversity of Canada's musical landscape. Today, I have the privilege of being in conversation with Ostara's fearless band manager, Lisa Buck, who joins me here in the studio, and bassist extraordinaire and one of Ostara's founding members, Jodi Proznick, joining in by phone. Now I have to tell you, when the three of us got together, the conversation flowed and followed some really important paths, and we had so much great content, not to mention incredible music to share with you, that we couldn't limit ourselves to just one episode. So here is part one of the Ostara Project in conversation. So Lisa and Jodi, such a pleasure to have you here. Welcome to Musing. Thanks so much for being in conversation with me today.
Oh, so delighted to be here, Janna.
Thank you, Janna. It's a pleasure to chat with you today.
Well, first of all, huge congratulations on the latest album, Roots. It's truly so original and refreshing, and I found it truly moving. And we're going to dive into that in detail. But for folks that have not experienced the Ostara Project as of yet, can you tell us about the group and the concept of it? Maybe Lisa first, and then I'll give Jodi the last word.
Jodi was the driving force and is the driving force behind Ostara, and then Amanda Tosoff, the piano player in the group, is the music director. And Jodi, I think you always had the idea that you wanted to have an all-female group. I had been in contact with Jodi about a documentary that I wanted to make during COVID that we made called Change the Tune, looked at the challenges faced by female jazz musicians. And that came out of my work as artistic director with Buckingham Palace, a jazz series that I program in Calgary. I just looked around and thought, where are all the women? You know, there were a couple of instances where I thought, and what's with this culture? You know, it's a little negative, it's a little bro-like. I phoned up Jodi and said, hey, what's this about? And of course, she was not surprised by my question. And so she helped me determine what women I wanted involved in the documentary. And then from there, I'm going to pass it over to you, Jo, because you decided to follow through on the thought that you had of creating an all-female group.
You know, I've been in this profession for 30 years and have had arguably a very successful time in this ecosystem, despite some of the barriers that do exist. And it was getting to a point where I felt I needed to not just, rest on my successes and my experiences that were generally positive, because I was looking around at the ecosystem and seeing that there weren't a lot of change in terms of the numbers of women that were involved with this music. And to be quite honest, I love making music in a jazz context so much that I was just saddened by the fact that there weren't more women getting to experience this incredible music and creating music with others. So the project was really Amanda and my brainchild as to how do we do something that was about the music first, but also a way of amplifying and creating kind of a lighthouse for not just other young women or women presenting or non-binary people, but for everyone, even the young men in the ecosystem, to see powerful, capable, competent women unapologetically making really beautiful music together. And I think that is more of a change. I mean, the conversations are great. Kind of a truth and reconciliation with this music ecosystem is super important, and allowing space for stories of harm. But we decided that creating art together, standing on stage together, vibrating at a really high frequency with a lot of competence and joy and community was our way of creating an alternative reality to how spaces might feel for people. And so we just wanted to make some art and get out there and do it. So luckily, Lisa had the same idea, and my record label at the time, Stellar Live, had reached out and inquired about putting more women on the label because there were so few. And there's a weekend where we were able to do the documentary, make an album, do a sold-out concert here in Vancouver. It was such a positive experience. Lisa and Amanda and I decided to keep on going with it. So here we are.
You know, just record an album, make a documentary, do a sold-out performance, all in, a weekend's work.
The night we did the recording, we were just shocked at how great it was. Like, we had just met on Thursday. It was a mad experiment, but everyone was so in it, and this great energy of like really wanting to deliver. And the album went on to, of course, get nominated for a Juno, which is quite remarkable given that the majority of us were strangers to each other. But that's the thing with music. People who are very skilled can go anywhere and create art together relatively quickly. And it's a pretty magical thing that I just want more people to be able to experience. It's an affirming thing to do as a human. It's medicinal in a way.
touch on the fact that these are all incredibly talented, award-winning members, all female identifying, of Ostara that have gone on to win awards and have their own solo careers and are very acclaimed. Can you tell me a bit more about those members and how you went about drawing them all together into this wonderful project, and what unifies you in this vision for Ostara?
I think that's a really great question, and I think it's worth noting that these women are drawn from across Canada. You can imagine the challenges of rehearsing and touring with all of that, but that's what it really took to bring a center of really highly competent women together. So we wanted women that were composers and band leaders in their own right. They all have their own distinct voices and projects, and there's a challenge with that where, everyone has got their own thing. How do you come together and have a unified sound? And one of the things that's been really gratifying to track, particularly over with the second album, is I hear this unified sound coming together. And that comes out of the relationships that have developed. I get the privilege of listening to the concerts and being able to observe the recordings. And the thing that really is remarkable about this group of women is they're so supportive of one another. When someone is on stage and taking a solo, you can just feel them giving their love and energy to the performers and celebrating their colleagues and now close friends. I think that's something that anyone can offer. That's not, women don't have that character alone, but I think we've been given more permission in society to offer that. And I see that as something that Ostara and other women are kind of leavening the jazz world with that. So remarkable musicians that we have. I'm going to talk about Jodi because she'll be modest. But Jodi, I hope it's fair to say you are a maven of the jazz world.
Truly.
You're truly a lighthouse that people admire and respect for all sorts of great reasons. So long career in the arts, many leadership positions, and tremendous bass player. Amanda Tosoff plays piano, again, Juno nominee and a beautiful composer. Allison Au on saxophone, at least 2 Juno Awards and more nominations there. Therrien just won the Cuban equivalent of the Grammy. A beautiful trumpet player from Rimouski and spending her time both in Montreal and Toronto. And then the wonderful drummer, Valérie Lacombe from Montreal, a lovely composer and a beautiful player. So we wanted Ostara to be an instrumental group there, so to make the point that that's usually where women don't get roles. And then we invite guest vocalists, depending on the project or the album. The next album that's coming out is already in the can, and it has multiple guest vocalists on it, just to really give platform to many Canadian voices, to many women, many heritages, and both geographic and cultural identities.
just touched on, but that I want to zero in on, is something that makes the Ostara sound so original is that the pieces, the arrangements, the compositions are all created internally, specifically for this group. And I imagine there's a lot of interactive process that goes on there. Can you talk about that a bit more? Because you have these extraordinary composers that you mentioned that are career composers within the group, but I think everyone has a role to play in that creation of these tracks. Is that correct?
Yes, and Jodi's the one that sets the context for that is just such a rich and welcoming environment. So, Jodi, I'm interested to hear what you have to say about that.
Well, the jazz composition landscape is a really interesting one. I think the really great composers often do two things. One is they write really strong material that can stand on its own, but often we're writing for a group of people. So as you're writing, you're sort of having the strengths or the sounds or the characters in mind as you're creating for the group. It certainly is the case with me. Whether I'm writing for my own quartet or for Ostara, I think we all have been at this a while now, so kind of know how to find that fine line between your voice. And we have to do it relatively quickly because we don't have time to rehearse for hours. So it has to be music that can kind of come off the page as quickly as possible without losing the voice or the technique or the compositional voice of the people who are bringing the music in. And as our relationship is developing as a band, I think we're all writing for the group with an even more understanding of who they are as people. But of course, I've played some of this music with other people, and it's also worked too. So, it's interesting that these songs have applicability, but when we're writing for a project, I definitely have the band in mind. And that's a fun part of building art in community with others. And so those interpersonal relationships off the bandstand end up embedded in the music and in the compositional style. So I'm curious to see where it all goes. The next album, we invited a bunch of Canadian women vocalists to bring their music in, or we wrote for them for specific voices. And so that was a little bit of a different, where it wasn't quite kind of the core five. It was people from outside, but it still worked. These women are some of the best musicians I know. Like, we happen to be women, but really, they're top-notch composers. It's just a win-win all around. It's so much fun playing their music. And even though some of it is quite complex, you're playing good material when there's an intuitiveness as you're sight reading or you're making sense of it. You understand that this is where you want to go right now because it's just telling you. I know that you know all about Diana, those really beautiful works. Just every bar is like a yes, it wants to go here and it's going there, yay. And so all the women write like that, for sure. So it's a delight to play everybody's music. It's a real collective that way.
talk a little bit more about what goes into a successful and organic collaboration such as this? An ensemble like this is pretty much dependent upon a successful and respectful collaboration, which allows each voice to be heard.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Just playing off of talking about the first album and this second one now, there's a care and compassion that is in this group that I find quite profound. Rachel Therrien's piece, Papa, that's a beautiful piece on the Roots album. I remember, and Jodi, you'll remember this distinctly, when she brought that, just the theme of that piece to Whitehorse, where the group was doing a residency in 2022. And it was just 6 weeks maybe after Rachel's father had died. He was a boat captain, and you can hear the lilt of the sea in that piece. And it was a very emotional moment as we were workshopping pieces. And Rachel said, I have this piece, and, my father has just died. And there were tears all around, and this lovely sharing and holding of both Rachel's creativity, but also of her grief and her celebration of her father. And when I hear that piece, even now as I talk about it, it makes me teary because it's such a great example of art taking in all the profundity of human life and transforming it into something beautiful, that grief and celebration and memory all come together. And I think that is such a powerful aspect with Ostara, that the artists that are part of the group are sensitive, supportive, compassionate, kind, a ton of fun. When we did the Canadian Jazz Festival circuit in 2022, the drivers of the vans, I think they were all men, they were like, oh, if you gals tour, we want to come with you. Because it was just...
Sign me up for that tour.
There has to be that professional respect where you know that the quality is there of the person's performance. You know you can trust them. You know that they're going to bring good quality material to the album. But then there's this lovely friendship that just bubbles up through all that professionalism. That would be how I would see it.
I love that. I love that. What about for you, Jodi?
I think sometimes in the professional music world, it can be a little bit disembodied, especially with instrumentalists, where you can show up to rehearsal and you just sort of play the music through and you miss out on that sort of interpersonal energy. The reason I love playing jazz is it's a social music. It's a conversation, and I love good conversation. And there's nothing like having great conversations with people who are great conversationalists, and that's essentially what we're doing on our instruments. So I think that we've managed to curate a core crew, who are both great conversationalists on and off the bandstand. They're very thoughtful people, great listeners. But my friend Phil Dwyer told me once when I was on tour with him, key to this life, Jodi, is to curate it well and to be mindful of synergy and how people will interact, not just as musicians, but just the whole community building aspect. I have taken that to heart, and I feel like this music project it's like a big dinner table. Lisa is like one of the best hosts in the world. She exemplifies this when she opens up her home to musicians, and I like to try and do that in professional spaces where it's pull up a chair, you're safe immediately, you are where you are is welcome and great, and let's see what kind of adventure we can have together. So I think that that's a real key. I think when people curate with that in mind of the hang, you know, is it a kind environment? Are people generous with each other? Are people there for each other? Are people listening to each other? And it just becomes this magical energy that people hear when they, you know, I think when you watch groups like that play who genuinely care about each other, and there's love at the table, and not just expertise, but the other stuff, the human stuff, the love, the connection, the compassion, heartedness, and a generosity of spirit, which I think is a big one. You know, you need to have clear boundaries and know what you want and know what you like and be able to ask for it and articulate it. But then there's times to be generous. And I think that also is super important, that you find people who have that.
I love your description that you use, and it applies to all the women in Ostara, that they are strong in the back and soft in the front.
Yes, for us, for me, this is an even bigger story, because it's really important to me that we're not just delivering excellent music, but that we're delivering qualities of leadership in our ecosystem that I'm comfortable young people looking to offer an alternative to a world that's been very heavy on the expertise and not always turning a blind eye to some issues with the humanity part. And I think our music ecosystem is needing a renovation where we lean more towards not just like technical expertise or impressive resumes, but also how are these folks contributing to the ecosystem, the community, the heart, the medicinal nature of music? How do they treat other people? And that's the bigger idea of what we're looking to do. I think Lisa and I and Amanda, I think we're all on the same page with this, is to just be high vibrational and offer a template for a different way of contributing to the music community.
Voyage sans retour. Je partirai ce jour faire la découverte de cette île là-bas qui sommeille au soleil. Dessus mon bateau blanc au goéland pareil, avec sa voile noire et son petit yak inerte. Tramontane au beaupré, la grande ours à mon sac, à la barre des nuits en larguant de la toile. J'apprendrai mon métier à compter les étoiles en fendant de la mer la houle et les ressacs. Oh! Je pendrai haut mon corps et mon cœur de bitume au vieux mât d'artimon de mon voilier désert. De mon voilier désert. Je jetterai mon âme au grand vent de la mer pour qu'il l'emporte au diable avec mon amertume.
Talking about this latest album, Roots, when you were formulating kind of the seed of the idea and the concept of Root, what was that and how did that unfold and take place? And did it follow the path that you thought it would, or were there some surprises and some side quests along the way?
Well, the invitation was made to the artists to sort of have a general theme that we were going to, in many ways, represent the Canadian mosaic. And I find that very timely right now. And one of the things that all of us love about Canada is that the Canadian identity allows for ethnic identities of places where we've come from, and that we don't need to shed that in order to have a Canadian identity, but that is integral to that, that we carry those traditions along. So that was the invitation and the idea of roots, where we've come from. And I think it's interesting how people responded to that. Rachelle's piece reflects her roots in Rimouski and her father. Jodi's reflects her roots in Ukraine, her family going back several generations. Amanda, Bulgarian piece that she did, really knowing very little about her Bulgarian heritage and kind of a reconnecting, I think, for her, or a connecting of those roots. Whereas Allison, her piece reflects her Jewish grandfather's experience and the tattoo that was put on him in Auschwitz. So everybody interpreted what part of their root they wanted to express. And I think that
Discover. Cases. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that was so fun. Jodi laid out, and Amanda, the theme, and then to see what people chose to express within that made for a really open concept and I think a very rich result.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would say rather than have a dictation, it was more of a primary question. You know, what does your roots mean to you? And just like Amanda, my family is Ukrainian on my dad's side. I have never been to Ukraine, and I had a visceral reaction when the war broke out, just as I think a lot of people in the diaspora from different regions feel a connection to place that they may have never been. And why is that? For me, it was through the arts. It was through the music, through the language. It was through my mom, who isn't even Ukrainian, she's Scottish, learning Pasanka, and we learned how to do Ukrainian Easter eggs. It was the food, it was the cultural traditions that were passed on. And so it got me really thinking about how important the arts are as an invitation and not a dictation, an invitation to our humanity and to the artistry, the art pieces that we all are, this assimilation of many different stories and many different colors and textures and sounds and tastes, and it getting back again to those foundational, almost sensual roots of what does it mean to be anything. Getting away from the political conversation or even religious and just the visceral, which music can do like nothing else, in my opinion. So that was the invitation, and I was so blown away by the results because it's all heart stuff. So the songs, they are little different chapters, different pieces of poetry. I like to equate it an art gallery of each song is a piece of art that an artist has brought forward, and then our job is to curate the room, the gallery, with all of the connective themes, with all of the different perspectives. So yeah, really, really fun to do. And you know what's super interesting is that the reviews and the people who've read it, listened to it, and have really understood where it's all coming from. People are having a visceral reaction to it because really it is a very hopeful thing. It's like, of course we can all share these stories with each other and be generous in spirit. So right now, when there's so much opposition and othering and separation, we all sit and tell our stories with each other and have a laugh and then go play songs. And that's also true right now.
And then I just wanted to touch on one additional layer that is unique. This album, but you've worked with them on other projects, is the addition of the Hindustani vocalist Shruti Ramani, who is absolutely extraordinary and I'm a super fangirl of. But it was amazing how their contribution fit in so beautifully to every single one of these tracks. Can you talk to me about that? I mean, because this jazz and improvisatory world, we often think of it as having freedom in it, that there is kind of a set guidelines of rules and tonalities and scales and structures. But then there's this beautiful freedom to the Hindustani vocalizing, and Shruti doesn't sing any text. It's all vocal bowls. That was just so remarkable how she flowed with the music, just like water. It all flowed together, like as a listener coming to this from the outside, knowing a little bit about the group. Can you tell me about that collaboration and how that came to be?
Well, Shruti's a remarkable musician and trained in the classical Indian style, which I think took 8 years for your sort of initial education. And she's a great example of what Jodi was talking about earlier, of someone who has tremendous technique. So, we all need that in the arts. You have to have a level of expertise, but then transcends that, infusing that tradition that she has such a great handle on with jazz and bringing really a whole new creative spirit to that. And she does it with Ostara. She does it with her own project, Ragaverse, which was nominated for a Juno Award just this past year. And Jodi's the bassist in that group. You have a real inside view in all things Shruti, Jodi.
The interesting part about all of this is all a product of the pandemic, right? When everything just stopped. All of these projects, all of these ideas, it was like we had a moment to just take a breath, and all of this really interesting stuff came forward. Shruti was one of those people. So she had moved here from Mumbai and gone to school at VIU, and then during the pandemic was like locked down like the rest of us. And then she just asked if I would play a gig with her, and I said, absolutely. And so we did this gig at this little restaurant in Vancouver. And, those stories of when someone discovers someone like in a bar singing some music and they become a big star. I mean, I feel like I had that moment where I was like, hey, I'm kind of a veteran on the scene and I really would like to support you. And so now she has management, and I actually started a record label because of her. It's a wonderful group and I just am excited to see where she goes. And to me, I just said it's the future. She's queer, she's Hindustani and jazz trained, living in Canada as an immigrant. The community just was like, yep, we love you. And so Vancouver's been very supportive. When we decided to have more of a frontline vocalist, a situation that had a little more pliability, so we were able to invite more voices in, she just seemed kind of like an obvious choice. I love the idea of these different women, different voices, different perspectives, landing on stage, sometimes singing together, and it's been awesome. Yeah.
This concludes part 1 of the Ostara Project in Conversation. Tune in next week for the second installment and more great music. This has been Musing on CJSW 90.9 FM in Calgary. I'm your host, Janna Sailor. Thanks so much for joining me for this celebration of music, creators, and ideas. Musing is a production of the Canadian Music Centre Prairie Region and is heard right here in Calgary and around the world. As we end our time together, we recognize that there are more than 630 First Nations communities across the lands that we now know of as Canada, representing 50 distinct nations and Indigenous languages. In addition, there are Métis in every province of the country and 53 Inuit communities speaking different dialects of Inuktitut across the north. We acknowledge them as the original music makers, dancers, creators, and caretakers of our lands, and they continue to inspire and teach us as we commit to learning and moving forward together. I'll leave you now with more music from the Ostara Project. Thanks so much for listening and for supporting Canadian music and creators in your community. Until next time, take care.